The Rubik's Clock is a gear puzzle invented in 1988, which, if you didn't already know, is the most hated event in the WCA. As you may imagine, clock is quite a controversial event. There are many arguments against the WCA, including clock, but first you need to know how the clock actually works. The Rubik's Clock is a gear puzzle, operated with two separate forms of input. 4 dials in the corners and 4 pins in the middle, surrounded by 9 clocks with 2 sides. The objective of the puzzle is to get every clock on both sides facing 12. In other cases, like my clock, you need to get all of the clocks facing the 2 red lines. The way you solve the puzzle is by pushing up a combination of pins and rotation of dials. I'll get to the innards of clock and how this works in a second, but first I'll show you an example solve with live audio. So, here is our example solve. We can look at both sides to determine which one's better. I think the black side is better. And what you do is you want to turn this center clock to match any one of these. So I can put this pin up, rotate this dial, and then they match. Put it down. Now you have to rotate these two to match one of these. So I'm going to match it with this one. And then the same process for these three. And now you have to make all of these clocks match this one. So you push up both of these pins and then match it. And then I like to put up all 4 and do that. So now they're all facing 12. Now what you do is you flip it over and you do the same thing. So I'll go a bit faster. So at the end you don't have to put them back to 12, but you have to make the 5 center clocks match one of these corner clocks. So what you can do is, if you want to match to this one, you can put every pin up except this one and then rotate all the clocks like that, and now they match. Now we can do this corner, and this corner, and then at the end you put them all back up, and if it's solved on both sides, then you're done. So now that you have seen the solving method, I can show you the insides of a Rubik's Clock with live audio again. Alright, now I can show you the insides of this thing right here. First step is to unscrew it. This takes a while, so this will be sped up. Alright, so I have it all unscrewed. These nuts, they they fell out. So I'm just gonna keep track of those. And if I did this right, it should all come apart. This is kind of hard. You have to sort of pull all of them at once. Sometimes it like bends and stuff. I'll speed this up if I need to. Alright, so I have it apart now. If I could get these plastic shells off, that would be great. So there's one, and let's see here. I don't really need to take off the plastic shell. It'll be fine. Alright, so we have our clock here. And there's two main types of clocks. There's these clocks, the corner clocks. So, they'd go in the corners like this. And they are connected. So they always face the same thing. So 12 on this side, 12 on this side. Obviously, if you rotate it, it's the same. And then we have these edge clocks, which are independent of their counterpart edge clock. So if you put them together, obviously they don't have to be the same. And then we have the pins with these like gears. So if we put in a pin, as you can see, if we rotate the pin, it rotates, sorry, the polarity's wrong, but it rotates all of the clocks, like around it. Same with if you add in 2 pins. As you can see, if you turn one of the pins, all of the clocks will turn around them. And this is basically how a clock works. So if we put together the entire thing, we can see how it works. So we have the black side with all the corners. Whoops. And now we can just put on the edges. Just doesn't really matter which orientation they're in. And then put the other shell on, make sure that the 12 is facing the same way. So yeah, now you have seen the insides of a clock, and I'm going to get back to putting this all back together. So yeah. Now you've seen the puzzle, now let's talk about the math. The teardown showed that there are 4 corner gears, 10 edge gears, and 4 pins. Each of these is able to be independently rotated, with every other piece being solved as shown here. The number of combinations is pretty high. The exact number is 20,542,695,432,781,824 separate combinations. And as I see a lot of people do this, if you were to go through a new combination every second, it would take 651,404,599 years to go through all of them. Also, a fun fact at the end of this boring section, you can actually turn the clock like this by twisting the pins. Now that I've shown you an explanation of the math of this event, we can get into the controversy of this puzzle and the challenges it has faced in its competition history. As mentioned earlier, clock is a very hated event as far as WCA events go. Some arguments for its removal are the following. It is not a twisty puzzle, it is very luck-based, unoptimized, extremely hardware-dependent even though the hardware is years behind, and it is not a good spectator event. Now let's go over those in order. Clock is a gear puzzle, as you saw in the teardown. It completely operates using gears, not a traditional core, with no pieces to twist around it. Even though there are over 20 quadrillion combinations, a lot of them are quite similar, with extremely thin differences between them. And if you've ever done clock seriously, you know you need a lot of luck. My point about clock being unoptimized requires some spoilers from later in the video. There have been 2 separate instances of the single record being lowered on the same day by the same person but in different rounds using different scrambles. This has happened in other events, but with 2 people in the same round using the same lucky scramble. This shows that the record holders were simply feeling good that day and performed well. Clock is a very hardware-dependent event, with every viable clock being a Rubik's brand that was heavily modded with cut plastic, shell spacing, unintended lubrication, and magnetic pins before 2020. Then better hardware came out, but that's for later. Finally, clock is not a good spectator event. It isn't obviously impressive like one-handed, and it's very hard to see at any sort of reasonable distance whether or not it's solid. As you might imagine from that rant there, a lot of people share the sentiment that many aspects of clock as an event are awful. Mentioned previously, clock hardware is years behind, and to be honest, it's been years behind since probably 2007. For 15 years, from 2003 to 2018, the only clock you could buy was a Rubik's brand. The Rubik's brand clocks were expensive but also bad. They required many mods to be remotely feasible, such as plastic cutting, lubrication, specific shell spacing, and magnetic pins. On top of this, the original Rubik's clock was only held together by glue. This meant that not only did you need a knife to cut it open, you couldn't put it back together unless you used tape or stickers with a very specific spacing in order for the clock to be less stiff. Another thing you had to do was buy very specific magnets for the magnetic pins that attracted from the sides, and modding clock used to be a mess. In 2018, a new clock finally hit the market from Lingao. This clock was slightly better with looser pins and better turning overall, but as my friend said, when he tore it down and put it back together, his pins were so loose that they would always fall through when he tried to solve it. So clock hardware was extremely lacking, but also monopolized by Rubik's until 15 years after it was added, and the new clock wasn't much better. 2 years after that, however, that idea would be challenged with the Shengshao clock. The Shengshao clock hit the shelves in July 2020, with it being the best clock that had ever come out. Whether or not it was good is up for debate, but only 1.5 months later, the Qi clock came out, and almost every mod was done for you at a fraction of the cost in a much better looking shell. The pins were pre-magnetized, the turning was smooth, and if you wanted to do other mods or lubricate it, the clock was held together by screws and not glue. Additionally, there were magnets in each individual spoke of the gears for additional stability. It also just feels really cool. But the problem still isn't fixed. As mentioned previously, the clock is $30, and not many people are willing to pay that much to enter the clock scene. So it's basically a pick your poison scenario. Either buy a mediocre clock or a $30 clock. Those are your only 2 options. As you may imagine, clock is an extremely uncompetitive event. And because of this, the records are very unoptimized, especially the single record. A few times, the record would be lowered twice on the same day by the same person in different rounds with different scrambles, meaning that the record holder was simply feeling good that day. If you're decent in clock and can get 2 records simply because you were feeling good, that shows a lot of signs of unoptimization in this event. There was also a 38-month period of complete inactivity in which nothing was done to lower the record. Hey guys, this was the most effort-intensive video I've ever made, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you made it this far, comment how much you love clock, and how that nothing I said was actually true. If you enjoyed, please like the video, share it with your friends that may be interested. Anyway, that's it from me, and have a great rest of your day.